Okay, so in today's video, I'm gonna elaborate further on list comprehension, and I'm gonna give you an example of nested list comprehension and also an example that has multiple ranges and also multiple filters. And then you can basically use this in different ways to your advantage. So let's say first that we have a list of lists, okay? We have not gone through list of lists yet, but this is a quite simple it's quite a simple concept, at least in our case. A list of lists is basically a list of lists and then let's say integers in here. And the way that I can explain this is basically let's think of a let's think of a normal list, right? Which is just a list of integers. And the way that we think of this is basically that we have a list and then we have an element, right? Followed by comma, followed by an element, followed by comma, and element, and so on. And the way that this list of lists is going to work is that we basically have a big list here, but let's think that these elements are themselves actually a list of elements, right? Meaning that we basically have multiple lists here. Okay, so the elements themselves are lists, meaning that the lists themselves can also have multiple elements inside of them. Okay, and this is basically a simple way to think of lists of lists. I'm gonna actually put a space here just to make it a little bit easier for new people to see. I've actually already defined our list that we will be working on here. It's basically a list of lists with 4 lists in it, and those lists have some numbers: 2, 4, 1, 3, 4, 8, 5, 12, and 2. And what I'm gonna show you is that we're gonna make a function that uses nested list comprehension to basically filter out all of the odd numbers in these lists. And the way that we do that, I can actually name a function here. Let's say that nested list filter, let's name it that. And let's say that it's gonna take in lists of integers, right? Let's do this to make it clear for everyone. And it's gonna output lists again of lists of integers. We're gonna get a new list of lists back, but it's gonna have the odd numbers removed. And the way that we would do this when we have basically a list of lists is that we're gonna have two list comprehensions inside of each other to basically work through this entire list. And I'm gonna show you that. So let's say that our variable in this case is let's say LOL for lists of lists. Maybe that's a bit comedic, but let's do it in this case. And the way that we do this is that we're gonna have 2 list comprehensions. And you remember from last video, list comprehensions is just the list brackets, basically, the not the curvy brackets, the straight brackets. And the way that we would do this is that we have 2 list comprehensions inside of each other. And you remember last video we said that it's basically an output, right, followed by a range and followed by a filter. This large. And then we can also on the outer here say that we are gonna have an outer range. And in this case, we won't actually need a filter here, so we can just skip that, and that would be fine. So let's say here that our output is gonna be a variable x, okay? And this is basically gonna be what is the inner element in these lists. And let's say that x is gonna go towards another variable, let's say xs in this case. And in this case, xs is basically gonna be our inner list, but it's not gonna be the innermost element. So xs will basically be this list, and then it will move on to this list, and then it will move on to this list, when x instead will be the inner element. So it will take on it would take upon itself the value 2 and then go to the value 4, and then x's would move up a step, and x would take on 1 and 3 and 4 and so on. And here we can actually type our filter. So we're gonna have that mod x by 2 is equal to 0. And this is another way to write our helper function that I used in the last video. It was basically that if x modded by 2 is equal to 0, then true else false. This is basically the same thing. We could also use just odd x, a built-in function, but we're not going to do that quite yet. We're going to try to code our own code. But now you can see here that this variable that we take in, we actually never use, right? And our list of lists is basically going to be this one here. But this is where our outer list comprehension comes in, because this outer range, we can say that XS, which is our upper bound in the inner list comprehension, is gonna go towards our list of lists, or LOL in this case. And let's think about this, okay? So we have an inner variable x here, which is going towards XS, and then XS is going towards LOL. And let's think about a normal list comprehension, right? Where we have an output x, right? And then we have that x is going towards XS. And here I'm talking about a list. And the way this works is that basically XS, right? XS is basically equal to the list, right? Let's say it has a bunch of numbers, right? Like this. And in this case, the x would then be the elements of this list, right? So let's think about it this way. We have our list of lists here, and then we have XS that's going towards our list of lists. Then XS would then become the elements, which is list of integers, from or for the outer list. And then our inner x that's going towards XS would then become the element of this list, which then is the 2 and 4, or the 1, 3, and 4, and so on. So this is basically a way to basically run through a list of lists of an arbitrary size. And let's say that we ran this function. We said nested list filter of list of lists. Then we would actually get in return, as you see, a list of lists, but with all of the odd numbers removed. Of course, we could flip this. We could say that x mod by 2 needs to be 1, right? And now we would get a filter. We would get a filter for the even numbers instead. And now you can see that I actually get returned 2 empty lists. But yeah, that's fine. So this is basically a way to run through lists of lists. So you basically run through all elements by using a nested list comprehension. Of course, you could elaborate on this further and make it even more complex. Or you could use some other built-in functions which we're going to go through in later videos. But it's also very good to basically understand list comprehension on a deep level to then to then elaborate on this. It's very good to use in certain situations. But I'm going to show you one more example. I'm basically going to show you an example. Let's say that we had a list. Okay, so I'm just going to define a list here. Okay, I'm going to say that the list is list of integers. Okay, and the list here is going to be equal to, and let's actually make a list comprehension. I say that we are going to take 2 variables in this case. We're going to take a times b, or let's say x times z. So this is going to be our output, okay? So we're going to have 2 variables in our output. And here I'm going to show you that you can basically have multiple ranges. So you remember that I said that you have a range, you have a filter, you have a range, a filter, right? Or actually one of those. In this case, we're basically going to have 2 ranges and 2 filters, one for each of the variables. Let's say that x is going towards, and we can just define it by using, let's say, the intervals that I talked about in an earlier video as well. And then let's say that x cannot be larger than 3. So x needs to be smaller or equal to 3. Then this is true, and then we would keep the output. But now we need a range for our z as well. Let's say that z is going towards, and let's say that we have some that have 3 and 5. Okay, and let's say that the filter from this for this is gonna be that let's say mod z by 2 needs to be equal to 1. Yeah, so this is basically that the number is odd, right? So let's say that I ran this code instead, our list. What do you think would happen if you try to think about the list comprehension? So we have one variable here. We're basically gonna multiply it by the other, and we have two different ranges, two different filters. So if we were to run this, you can see that we get 3, 5, 6, 10, 9, and 15. So if we think about this, this is basically first 3. So we take x, right? X is 1. Check this filter, right? That's fine. That's cool. Great. X is smaller than 3, or smaller or equal to 3. That's true. Now we take z. Z starts at 3. Is this is basically is odd. We can basically think, or just odd, see, and that's true. It's odd. So we keep that, and then now our output is x times z. So we take 1 times 3, and we keep that in the list. Now let's keep x at 1, because z can move. 4 is not odd, so we don't keep this output. So we don't keep 1 times 4. Now z goes to 5. 5 is odd, and now we keep 1 times 5, and so on. And then x moves to 2, and then z goes back to 3, and we go again. So this is just a simple example of using multiple ranges and using multiple filters inside of list comprehensions, and it can also be useful in certain situations. Mostly the multiple filters one I seem to use the most, actually. But yeah, that's it for today's video.